Thank you for joining us. Now I'm going to turn it over for Tina and Germaine, if you'll introduce yourselves, and then we'll get started with our questions. And I guess we'll go alphabetically. So Tina.
Oh, okay. Hi there, Tina Elmowitz. I'm a partner and the Chief People Officer at RBB Communications. And our firm is a fully integrated communications agency, meaning we PR, digital, social, branding, marketing, web development, everything under one roof, which has been great. We are the largest agency in Florida. We were just named Agency of the Year nationally, so we're really proud of that. But what's been really interesting is just through all these times, not only am I working with clients, but obviously doing a lot of work with our employees. And, you know, my number one goal is employee happiness. So when we think about how do we manage through this pandemic, through the social justice issues, there's certainly a lot to talk about. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tina. So I'm Germaine Smith-Baugh. I serve as the president and CEO of the Urban League of Broward County, which is in Fort Lauderdale. So I know that we have people in other parts of the state of Florida. If you're unfamiliar with the Urban League, really high level, we were formed in 1910 really as a response to the move of many African Americans from the southern parts of the United States to the northern parts of the United States, from an agricultural environment to clearly a more industrial environment. It was founded by a white female philanthropist and a Black male social worker for the purposes of really addressing the concentration of African Americans at the time in ghettos, like most people who are immigrants to places. But in this case, they were Americans moving from one part to another. So any urban league that you might engage with works primarily in urban communities, and we do direct service work, advocacy, and research in education, entrepreneurship, jobs, justice, housing, and health. So we're a part of that ecosystem. I've been with the Urban League for 24 years. I'm a member of our TCI forum, also on the advisory board for TCI. Tina and I actually share the same forum. And when we did our Clifton Strengths Finder, we actually realized that we are the same from different mothers. Literally, we ended up with the same block, same everything. So yep. It's really cool to be doing this with her today, because I get to hang out with her every month.
Great, thank you. So we're going to launch into our questions, and so that I keep track of who went first, I'm going to stay with the alphabetical thing. So the first question, I'll ask, Tina will respond first, and then Germaine. And then the second question, it's Germaine first and Tina, so you guys get the pattern there. And do feel free, we're a small enough group that if you have comments to add again, if there's something you want to share that you think would be, we're all about sharing and peer mentoring here, feel free to add, or if there's, you know, clarification or an additional question related to that question. And at the end, as time permits, we'll take any additional questions from the floor. So question number one, as we prepare to enter into a new era of work, what will change and who should we be collaborating with? So pretty broad question.
It's really broad, but what I've narrowed it down to as I thought about it is some of the key stakeholders, really, because there is so much that will change and will continue to evolve and change. And I think some of this we get into with some of the following questions too. So I'm not going to try and answer it all at once, but there are a lot of stakeholders for all of us, right? You have your employees, you have customers, you have clients, competitors, vendors, partners, investors. You have your community that you serve, that you live in. And I think the one stakeholder that we forget the most is ourselves. And so a couple that I just wanted to touch on was one, the competitors, because I think we also forget sometimes what that looks like. And especially in our industry, in the communications industry, we're actually seeing agencies who were once competitors now collaborating to offer clients more and better services. And that can happen in any industry. It kind of reminds me of the Got Milk campaign, right? Where you had this industry completely united for the sake of just a long-term survival of dairy. And the competitors understood that there was a threat, a much larger threat, and they made a decision to push the industry forward together. And so I think this can happen all over the place, and don't discount of, you know, the success and the progress you can make by working together with your competitors. But also important is we have to think about ourselves as business owners and really understand what are our limits. Sometimes, you know, we don't really think about it because we get in the rut of what we're doing. We have our procedures and policies in place, but now is the time to think about how that should change. You know, is the team you built the strongest possible? And this is one of the toughest things, is because all of a sudden overnight, you may need to cut staff. You may need to cut expenses significantly. And it can become really hard to make those choices. But when you're forced to do it, all of a sudden it gets a little easier to distinguish between excellence and everything else. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you think about the services that you use. Do you really need them? Do you need those expense accounts? You know, you need to look at everything within your company so that you can emerge even stronger and be prepared, you know, to weather the next storm. And one thing to touch on, I think that everyone's dealing with, especially, you know, is I think it was Sandy, you just spoke about, you just finished up your PPP money. So now what, right? And so as you start to think about maybe even paring down your staff, how do you weed out the lesser performers? And it can be really easy to weed out people who just are bad at their job, right? But it's really hard when it's someone who might have a few really strong skills, might be really liked by a particular client or a particular manager. And that's a lot harder to fire them, to get rid of them. But as my partner, Christine, has said, she goes, you know, it's really only hard until you're forced into a life. There isn't enough room for everybody. Suddenly that just gets a whole lot easier. But I don't think it really ever gets easy. But you really have to do some soul searching on that. And if your business is going to survive, what can you live with, right? So you're kind of looking at your moral compass. You're looking at what's going to let you sleep at night too. So I think thinking about yourself as one of your key stakeholders is critical. And then the last thing I would just touch on is just as you think about just your company in of itself is that, you know, how has your brand changed through all of this? And now is the time to look at your vision, your values. Are they still valid? Are you still living them? And how are you living them internally and externally? And really what needs to be revised? Now, you know, we want to look at all these pieces now, and that will help you as you communicate out to all these other constituents and stakeholders as well.
Great, thank you. Germaine.
The only thing I would want to add to what Tina said is focusing on the you part, like really taking care of yourself. I think many of us, and if this is relevant to you, just put the thumbs up, whether it's in the reaction or just your physical thumb, is that we have found ourselves in these last few weeks, couple months, being constantly on the go. Like we haven't created like stop points. Like before you would get in the car, you would drive to a meeting, that was kind of like your downtime, or when you would leave the office. But given the fact that office and home and family and business all have, you know, kind of rolled into one space, we're not stopping, you know, we're not finding that to happen. So a couple of thumbs up there related to being able to say that that's the way that we're seeing each other or seeing ourselves. So one of the things that I think is just a couple of points I want to share on the you part is let's make sure that we're practicing gratitude. Every day you wake up and have the opportunity to wake up in your right mind and in your right senses, I want you to think about 3 things by yourself or with your team that you're grateful for, and actually verbalize that. You know, like take the time within your team to say those things. The second thing is to really set your intention every day and be specific about it. Because I don't know about you, like the days all run together. I can't tell what meeting was when and where. But if I set the intention today that I plan on reaching out to 5 board members or 5 customers or 5 whatever, that is my intention, you know, for the day. You know, we're all learning something new. Pick something new that you want to learn for the week and literally schedule that into your calendar. And then the last piece I would say is let's all work on being the strongest version of ourselves. the strongest version of ourselves. Not everybody has the same strengths. Not everyone has same challenges and opportunities, but we have to figure out how we really build ourselves and move ourselves forward.
Great, thank you. And, thinking of the collaboration piece as not-for-profits, we've been taught to do that for a much longer than this pandemic. And now it's even more important. But for like the last, Pat, 10 years, the trend has been, and we've been pushed more and more to operate collaboratively, which is a good thing. And I think I'm guessing that post-pandemic, we'll see even more of that. Okay, next question, and we're going to start with Germaine. What do you need to consider, and who can help us safely return to work?
So that's a really interesting question. Laura, can you tell me, am I going in and out?
You were a little bit, and I'm not sure. It came back and we didn't lose it, but you did just a tiny bit.
Okay, the internet is coming up as unstable. I have bought hotspots. I have done everything I possibly can, to do this. But we're going to be prayerful that it can stay on hold for the next 60 minutes and make this work. So what can we consider? What should we be considering to be able to return to work in a safe manner? And this is definitely something that we have had to think about from a not-for-profit perspective, us working, in a community that has been the highest zip codes in Broward County for COVID in terms of COVID being positive, and being able to really address this issue. So first and foremost, all of us are thinking about the safety of our clients, of our customers, of our staff. That we're all doing. But the one thing that I'm sure we all had to figure out, and I think Sandy, you might be there too, when your revenue is down, how do I now put all of these safety measures in place? What does that look like, moving forward? So when we think about safety, thinking about the culture of the organization, and I think we're going to talk about that a little later, the way that we want to engage our customers, engage our staff, engage our stakeholders, what will that look like? And then I don't think we should be playing short the issue of public relations. I've learned that the hard way because, and it's not because Tina is on the line, it is, to say the least.
I appreciate the plug.
But the plug is that we are going to have to fix, because some of this is a psychological battle that we are going to have to push forward with our customers and with our staff, that it is safe for us to be able to return, that it is safe for us to be able to come back into, our respective places or engage with clients. So when we think about how we safely return, let's make sure that we're putting the lived experience in the middle of the conversation. So for example, talking to your customers, what will make them feel safe in terms of coming back into your building? Vendors, what will make it safe for them? But let's make sure that we're having it's easy with staff because, we can take that time and do that. But let's think about all the other groups that we may just kind of put off to the side and say, oh yeah, we're doing everything we possibly can. Let's make sure that we're hearing from them what safety looks like to them, because it might look differently to them than it does to us, so that we could clearly be able to give very clear strategies. And then from a PR and communication perspective, blast it out. Make sure that everybody knows what you're putting in place. This happens a lot if you're in the faith community. Churches are really putting out there what we're doing to make it safe for people to come back into, houses of worship, wherever it might be, churches, synagogues, etc. How you're doing to make it safe for people to come back. I think the best that I have seen do this is the hospitals, with the commercials that they are running related to demonstrating their safety measures. So when we think about that safety and being able to come back in, let's make sure that we're really advertising and engaging people in that.
And I can testify for hospitals being safe because I just went through surgery a month ago in a hospital. Tina, same question.
I completely agree with everything Germaine said, and reinforce really that employees are one of your top considerations, because if they don't feel safe, you're kind of up the creek. You have a really big challenge on your hands. And your team's buy-in to your back to work plan is critical, because they are the ones that are sustaining it and executing it. So, and once you have that buy-in, you have to make sure you have the plan obviously in place, and you have to work the plan. And I'll give you an example, because we're working with a lot of our clients on plans like this that we've dubbed Ready, Set, Go, because there really are some specific milestones within this plan and what you have to prepare. So for example, on the Ready side is where you look at that landscape analysis. You look at obviously the stakeholder groups like we just talked about before. What are their mindsets and their expectations? How do you prepare for future readiness plan that gets you for, as you think about future pandemics or spikes for the current one, are you going to be ready? Refinement of your crisis plan and your crisis communications training. Now is the time to revisit that. The set part is that return to work transition. We call it like a transition toolkit. And that could include external facing, like health and sanitation manual, information like Germaine and Lori are just talking about from hospitals are doing that. But there's website and social media policies. It's your cascade communication structure. It's an employee health and safety pledge that we've done as well, that outlines what the company is committed to and what the role of the employee is, so that there's that shared responsibility for wellness. And then the third part is go. And that brings in that change management training, where you might hire and train for change capacity, establish decision-making structures. Think about an open for business marketing toolkit. And that's when Germaine is talking about get the word out there. How are you going to do that? And it could have stakeholder specific messaging and materials, communications cadence from your executive team, back to work rewards even for your employees. How do you capture the feedback as you continue to go, so you can keep improving and continue to evolve through the process and be ready for the next one?
Absolutely. One thing that Tina said that I really do want to highlight is, that I think many times we try a cookie cutter type way of handling, situations. And I think that clearly in this time, we're going to realize that we're going to have to pivot quickly, figure out what's really working for us. So that ongoing communication and that ongoing feedback is going to be so important for each one of our stakeholders. And we need to really make sure that we're setting up a mechanism for that feedback to get to us and get to us quickly before we lose either our market share or our competitive edge on an ongoing basis.
So thank you, Germaine. Tina, the next question we'll start with you. And some of these kind of blend in together a little bit, so we might have covered some. But the question is, the scale of what is ahead of us is hard to imagine. Understatement. Where do I start with partnerships?
So I think on this one, Germaine is probably going to have a lot more to add to this, but I'll tell you what it looks like from our perspective, because we have a different approach to partnerships. For Germaine, I think that's part of her business model every single day. For us, a lot of the partnerships are things like services we're using, things like that. And when we look at that, we look at the partnerships that we have in place. So what can you drive stronger engagement and interaction? But we also look for when it's a monetary partnership, we look for opportunities to negotiate and ways that can give us more flexibility. So for example, like we're having a lot of contracts that are coming up for performance management systems and things like that. And so we're looking for opportunities. Can you go month to month? Can you go quarter to quarter instead of signing a large annual plan? Because we really don't know what the future holds and it's hard to predict. And I will tell you, there are companies, even though they don't offer options like that, if you talk to them about it, you'd be surprised how many people are open to it and to give you that level of flexibility. And then same when you're looking at some new partnerships, if there's new things that you want to bring on board, look for clauses that give you that wiggle room, and just keep pushing it. But I think that Germaine will have a very different perspective on this. I'm actually going to pass it to her.
So when I think about the question in terms of how do you start with partnerships, given the fact that that really is the foundation of what we do in order to sustain this not-for-profit work, and I can probably use Wells Fargo as a really good example of this. So first of all, there has to be a value match. You know, there has to be a mission match. Many people come to the Urban League, for example, wanting to have a partnership because they're like, oh, yeah, I should partner with the Urban League. Well, when you sit down and really think about what is our mission, what's our values, what's your mission, what's your values, sometimes there's a match and sometimes there isn't. And maybe there might be, you might be better spent spending your time maybe with a different organization or investing your time in a different way. So always really be very clear about why are we trying to be in relationship, with each other, and be somewhat unapologetic about that. So it's kind of like when you might have met your significant other for the first time and you didn't know that he or she would be that. You somewhere thought that there was a mission match and then it went like down a different road. So sometimes we really do have to ask like the hard questions to say, do we really have that match that makes sense? The second thing is, if you establish that, then spend the time actually cultivating the relationship. So most recently, we sent an invite to CEOs of CEOs that have been long-term investors in the Urban League to have a conversation around race, justice, equity. I want to tell you that Wells Fargo was the first to respond. First to respond. Yay. Right? Why? I think there's a mission match. There's a long time relationship that has been built. We're not foreign to them. They're not foreign to us. And there's a trust level, that is there. That they know that if they come into a conversation with us, it's not a I got you. It's not I'm trying to find anything, to pinpoint. We're in this together. And they truly believe when we talk about a conversation, but they were the first to respond. And their market leader was the second. So they were the first to respond, Patrick. And then their market leader was the second to confirm that he would be president. And again, that's where partnership comes in, when you're really, really clear about it. So in this post-COVID, or whenever post comes, I guess we're at this point, we really want to think about how we are cultivating the relationship. I say to people all the time that if you want to have a strong relationship, you cultivate that relationship in times of calm so that in the time of crisis, it can be absolutely stewarded and activated. But many times we don't do that. We cultivate relationships truly in crisis and expect them to be activated very, very quickly. So we want to make sure that we are looking at those relationships. Last two things, actually write down who you want to partner with. Like write down the organizations, the entities, whomever it is that you want to partner with, and social map it. Like, why is it important for us to be in relationship? Why is it important for us to be in this partnership? And by writing it down, knowing clear about what it is you want from the relationship, hearing very clearly what they need from the relationship, vice versa, then you actually have a cadence of accountability that you would then put into place to be able to have these discussions, moving forward. I think a lot of times we throw around collaboration and partnership and relationships, but if we get really honest with ourselves, we really have a handful of partnerships that are really true, that are truly authentic. But what is key, and even for me during this time, I had to step back and look at like our civic partnerships that we might have had in place that were really surface partnerships. They didn't go very deep. It was like, oh, we should have a partnership with them, so we kind of have a partnership with them. Now I'm really sitting back and saying the same intentionality that we had with building a relationship and have with building a relationship with a Wells Fargo is the same way that I should be having a relationship with the NAACP, with the Broward Black Chamber, other organizations in my world that are Black-led. We take for granted some of those relationships. So really think about not taking relationships for granted and who and why you need to have those partnerships to be deep. And that was not a Wells Fargo plug. It still happens to be true.
Germaine, let me just tell you the flip side of that, which is interesting that you said it that way. And we did not rehearse this, I promise. But when I saw the email and I sent it to Hector, hey, as a heads up, there's something coming your way from the Urban League. And he said, when is it? And he said, oh, I've got a meeting that's been on my books for a month. And I said, well, just a heads up, it's coming your way. And then when he got that email, he said, you know what? The Urban League does not ask us to do these kind of things very often. We know this is important. And he said he get back, he said, don't worry, I'll be there. I'll move this meeting. And so it's the strength of that partnership on our side that he knew he wanted to be there and represent, our company because of that long-standing partnership that he has, not just with you, but with, with a lot of elements within the Urban League. So, and how it goes.
And I think that this is also another great example to the team. So what we did is that we didn't send the invitation directly to the CEO of the market. The first email went to the relationship, like a Patrick relationship, so that he would have a heads up that his CEO would be receiving, this invitation to have the conversation. So as a result, he is not blindsided by his CEO saying, what is this? Where is this coming from? So always kind of think about the levels of relationship and the way that you need to have them in order to move forward. I have colleagues that said, well, I'm only building a relationship with the CEO and that's it. I said, you're going to see how that's going to work out for you in the long run. I believe in building relationships at all levels of organizations. And if you are not at least 3 to 4 levels deep within an organization, you're probably going to end up in a situation where people move out of those roles. You're constantly having to rebuild. But if you intentionally go through the organizations and the partnerships that you need to have deeply, you would think about those 3 or 4 levels. And I know that, Patrick, you can attest to at least 4 levels of relationships that we have.
And that goes beyond just not-for-profits. That's in any, with your customer.
Grass tops and tree tops, as I say, or I stole from somebody else, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Germaine, you're back up with, what if none of my staff wants to stop working from home? I question the ability to maintain a culture and train new staff on the more qualitative aspects of teamwork and client service.
I had that question posed to me. We had not been an organization, very honestly, that truly promoted telework. We wanted people in the office. We wanted them there to engage with, the residents of Broward, et cetera. So we never really promoted it. Then COVID happened and we had no choice. So we were one of those organizations that needed to pivot really, really quickly to continue to serve and be able to move forward our mission. So now my staff is asking me, well, do we really have to come back to the office in order to do this? They want to have, I moved them to a 4-day work week because I thought it would be really intense. Now they want to keep a 4-day work week. So as my mom would tell me, you shouldn't start stuff that you don't want to, you're not willing to continue. You learn this the hard way. And she told me this when I got married, like, don't start like ironing clothes and doing all that kind of stuff if you don't plan on keep doing it. So to this day, I don't do that very often. But I will say this. My response, and I think it's a very legitimate question, my response is really to culture. I don't see how, at least in my world, we can promote the type of culture of being responsive to community if we're all separated in our respective homes. I think that there is something to be said about, I see you, Laura. I think there's something about being able to come together, the proximity or being proximate with people, I think is really important to our culture. So my response to my staff has been safety first. There's no doubt about that. Do we have to be more flexible maybe in our thought processes moving forward with our staff related to them coming into work? Maybe. But the Urban League will never be an organization that's 100% working from home. That's just not who we are. And if that is a place that, you know, individuals are looking for, then clearly Urban League is not going to be the company for them in the long haul. So I've been very direct, you know, about that. That more than likely may have us lose some staff members because there may be other not-for-profits who are more flexible, you know, in that way. But we have to be proximate with our families. We have to be proximate with the kids that we serve. And I think is in those moments is where you're able to really understand and demonstrate the care. This type of Zoom environment works really well, particularly with us. But if a person starts breaking down, I'll just put it this way. We have had situations where staff is doing a Zoom call with a client and there's literally a domestic violence situation happening behind them. I mean, those are the realities of the work that we do. So I think that for us, it's really a matter of the kind of culture that we know that we must promote to continue our mission. And we realize in that process, some people will like it, some people won't. We will put safety first and then gradually begin to bring people back. So we have given people who might have like other physical challenges, et cetera, to coming back in other options. So we're going to stay open to those options. But I don't see us being an organization that can be 100% telework.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tina.
You know, and to add to that, I think, you know, because every company is a little different. And I have to say, I even have clients who have been trying to figure out how to work remotely for 2, 3, 4 years. And let me tell you, they worked it out in 3 weeks as soon as the pandemic hit. So you know it can be done. And it's just a matter now of how do you adapt the company to make that work. And you know, one of the things that we've always done, because we've always had a flexible work policy where people can work from anywhere. And it's so important that we focus on outcomes over outputs and presence. Mm-hmm. And it matters, are they contributing? What's the value? And then when you think about the culture, you have to think about that differently too, because again, it's the culture, it's the values of your company versus the presence of everybody together. Everyone can be together and it not be very effective. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a few things to consider and how to get there. One is you have to invest in the home technology, because you also have to assume not all your employees are going to have the tech access and hardware that are required for their position. And if you really want that to match the right way as an employer, we need to step in and provide that so that they can do their job and feel good about it and deliver the value you're looking for. But I also think then more on a culture side, I think you need to design events that boost that sociability. And it could be as simple as having a morning coffee with the whole team on Zoom. You know, we do most of our meetings we're on Teams, but we want people to be on video. I think it is important to connect and make sure we stay connected. But whereas nobody wanted to do video before when we were on mm-hmm. Skype, now everybody's doing it. It's just normal now, right? You've been forced into it. So all of a sudden we're able to create this culture because I can see what's going on. I can see who has done their hair and who hasn't. And I can see everyone's dogs and just like you saw mine. And so, you get to know people too, and that does help support the culture of the company. And then the last thing is think about how the jobs might be redesigned, because what's going to happen is that we have a summer where kids are home. They're not even doing online school. What are they doing all summer? Yes, there's camps open, but a lot of people are not comfortable sending their kids. And so can the jobs be looked at, for example, in blocks of time, where you have on and off blocks where there are very specific expectations so everybody knows how that works. So you don't have those moments of blackout, like, why can't I find them? Where are they? You know exactly who's working and when, and they can be staggered or whatever works for people's, what for their needs. But you create these home and work boundaries, and you end up with something a little steadier and more predictable. And then I think you also have to look at there are businesses that just can't do it, right? So if you can't or you don't want to go remote at all, that's when you have to look at a very transparent plan of action. So what are the expectations? And include the reasons why you have certain expectations, so that everybody's on the same page, because that buy-in is going to be really key to making it work. And so the reality is you may have some team members that are not on board. And that's when you have to have, what is your plan of attack? And you should think about this in advance. You know, how are you going to handle these situations? Are you going to part ways with those people because you're going to be completely inflexible to it? Are you open to dialogue to consider new options or hybrid options? But whatever the case is, just have that plan of action, create the policy, communicate the policy, look to create the buy-in, and then just clearly establish the outcomes. If they're not followed through, what happens? So it's challenging and it's not an easy thing to do, but the more planful you can be, the more transparent you are, the more success you'll have with it too.
Great, thank you. And so that we can get to our last two questions, especially our last, with the next question, if it could just, we could do it quickly because I know we only have 10 minutes left.
Wow.
And then I know, I can't even believe it because I do want to, I will make sure we have time for our Juneteenth question before we close out.
Yeah.
So quickly,
I would say we mostly covered number 6 anyway. We could probably skip that one.
Okay. Well, then let's just 5 quickly is would like to know what the general consensus is on when your company will resume hiring. And that can be a quick answer.
Yeah, we've already started hiring because I think now is a really great time to connect with top talent. People have lost their positions, obviously, due to this pandemic, and there's a lot of talent on the market at every level. So even if you are not ready to hire, I strongly recommend you start interviewing regardless. Develop those relationships with people so that when you're ready to pull the trigger, you know exactly who you want to hire. And if you're not ready to hire full-time, people who are unemployed may consider a contract relationship. They may not because that might affect their unemployment, but if they are, it's a great way to get to know somebody and find out if they really are a good match for you.
Ditto. Same here. Just a plug, hiring for a vice president of finance and administration. So if you know anyone in that area, yes.
Okay, then I'm going to go. Thank you, Tina, for reminding me that we've covered a lot of 6, and we did, and thank you, which was a question on tension growing between rule followers and lax behavior, and what type of collaborations can get us through that process from a management level. And we did talk a lot about bringing staff and patrons along. So my last question, Germaine, we'll start with you on this one. Given the Juneteenth holiday, can you answer the same question, but addressing racial injustice? As we prepare to enter into a new era of work, what will change and who should we be collaborating with? How should we voice our opinion support within the workplace and business?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. And I think the first part of this issue of race and equity and the lens in which all of us, you know, are looking at this issue is, and when we started it, the Urban League wakes up, and I have to admit this, so this kind of gives you a frame for the way that I'm responding. This is what literally I do every day. I think about race, I think about equity, I think about justice. I think about how to create that access, you know, for people. So it's a really interesting experience for me in this last 3 weeks. In terms of the way that others have began to engage with me in the conversation, but I continue to be open to it because I want to make sure that we are all pushing ourselves, self-included, to do, first of all, self-examination. You know, people have said, you know, well, Germaine, you know, you must be the expert in this. I said, I'm an expert in my lived experience. That's what I'm an expert in. I could tell you, I mean, there are clearly facts that we could share and we could talk about, but all of us have a lived experience that might seem and look different, and we all have to bring that to the table. So I think in this era of work, and as we go back, it's clearly going to be at the forefront of a lot of our conversations. You probably have experienced that today if you are with a large corporation. Some people are closing early for reflection. Some are having Zoom town hall meetings for education. And what I've challenged corporations who have talked to me about it is, if you're going to close, that's fine, but can you please give people some information for them to reflect on? So I've sent people like lists of like books and other things for them to read, like White Fragility is a book now that you can't even get on print. You can only, I believe, get it Audible now. If folks have not watched the Netflix documentary, The 13th, you know, just giving people some resources that it's not just like kind of like Martin Luther King holiday, where it seems to be more of a day off than a day on of service, is like, let's be careful that we are not just, you know, doing a checkoff here, and being able to really use it as an opportunity to educate, and also to educate from the perspective that Africans, the African American experience did not begin when it on the shores of Virginia. That's not it. The African experience is an experience that is very rich in history, and although we may tend to start it at a certain point in America, I really encourage people to go beyond that and understand really the history. The last thing I'll share on this, and because I'm really more interested in the conversation for the couple of minutes that we have, is the part where it says, how should we voice our opinions and support, you know, within the workplace? I think one of the things that's really important for us to consider, and Renee, I think you shared that in terms of being an ally. And I have a lot of people that start off conversations with me that says, I am not racist. I said, okay. But these days, it's not about just not being racist. It's about being anti-racist. Like, what actual things are we doing to be able to demonstrate that we really want to push forward an agenda that is more equitable for people of color in this community? You know, what does that look like in your workplace? So like when Black executives call me, many of them call me just for an outlet because they don't feel safe saying things within their company. The same companies that ink checks to organizations like the Urban League, right? But we gotta really begin to have those intimate conversations where people can tell you their stories. You know, we have board meetings where, these are partners in firms that will share, yeah, I've been pulled over 7 to 10 times, and board members like look at them like, what do you mean you've been pulled over? It's like, I live in Davie. People are trying to figure out, why am I here? And then they start telling their story, you know? And it's like things like that that make people like, oh my gosh, but when I see you in your suit and your tie and you look a certain way to me. But that experience isn't everybody's experience. And I think it's really important that we allow space within our workplaces for everybody to share their stories. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, people from different parts of the United States to be able to share those stories. And that's what we can do to be able to really look at ourselves and figure out, what are we doing internally? What things should we be challenging internally? And as I say to many of the Black executives that call me, they might be the only person at the table. I said, if you don't say something, how does the person in the warehouse get to say anything? How does the cashier get to say anything if you're willing to sit here silent? So sometimes I'm just literally the wind underneath their wings to say, speak up, because you need to and because you have to. And folks who want to have allegiance, speak up, to give those individuals the wind to be like, it's okay, you know, to say out loud. And yeah, it's gonna cost us something. It might cost you the promotion. I've seen that, you know, it might cost you something. But if other people did not step in, I wouldn't be sitting here on this Zoom call with you. Jessica wouldn't be sitting here on this Zoom. There wouldn't even be a TCI if women's rights weren't, somebody didn't stay on the wall, you know, for that. So when my daughter at 13 says to me, Mom, why are you working so hard? You know that this is going to happen again, right? Then I have to sit with her and say, I can't tell you that it won't. A George Floyd murder wouldn't happen again. But what I can tell you is that it is up to us to stay on this wall. And if we don't stay on this wall and voice and say what needs to be said, if somebody didn't do that 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, our reality would look a whole lot different. So those are my thoughts. So I'll be happy to share the list that I've shared with others, Lori. But if you have not gotten the book White Fragility, that is definitely one that you might want to read. Or Audible. Actually, you can't get it in print now.
Hopefully, Kindle, we should be able to get it then.
Mhm.
That was beautifully said and actually brought tears to my eyes. Tina, would you like to add to that conversation?
There's not much I can add to that. I mean, just incredible and powerful. And I will give you just a quick 30 seconds because I read a very interesting blog yesterday. This is from one of the top senior content consultant for LinkedIn. And she wrote, stay silent and risk being criticized for not saying anything. Say something and risk it being the wrong thing. And the truth is both options are risks, right? And this is something that every company is grappling with right now because they are trying to figure out how they want to show up to the world at large and how are they going to live that out through the values. And so it's even beyond a business decision, it's a decision of conscience. And it's something that everyone really needs to spend time and make that room to really make those decisions. And again, you could get criticized for them, but if you do what's right, that path, you are going to sleep a lot better at night. Mm-hmm. And so I encourage people, don't be scared to do the right thing. Push people, drive the education, invest that time.
And the other thing I want to say is that people have said that to me, Germaine, I just don't want to say the wrong thing. I said, you will, because I'm going to say the wrong thing and you're going to say the wrong thing. It's not because of the color of my skin, I get like a pass to say whatever it is I want to say. I said, all of us have to enter the space with understanding and from a human perspective to say, I'm going to honor you and what you have to say. I may not always agree with it, just like you may not always agree with what I have to say, but at least at the very least, let's be able to have this conversation and not sweep it under the rug. And I have to tell you that although these types of situations have happened many times, in our society, this feels, looks, acts differently. I mean, when you see people globally reacting to this, and I do have some companies, I think, that are scared to have this conversation next week with the Urban League, which was a little shocking.
I saw one thing posted on social media that has really stuck with me, and it said, if you ever wondered how you would have acted during the Holocaust or during slavery, you're doing it right now. So if you are staying silent, if you're not doing anything, and as someone I thought just posted that MLK quote that, it's the silence that is the deadliest part. And so we all have to play our parts to really think about how you are going to participate.
Absolutely.
Well, our time has come to an end, and please read what Jen put in the chat right there.
And Renee did too.
And Renee, both of those, the brown eye, blue eye, and the Martin Luther King about remembering the voices of our enemy, but the silence of our friends. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. And I hope you take some time for reflection. And I hope you and we as TCI keep having these conversations. And we do have a TCI talk that another board member, many of you know, Tina Brown, is leading next Wednesday. And it is on these difficult conversations and these discussions, specifically as it relates to George Floyd and racial inequalities. So that's next Wednesday morning. And reflect, but do have a wonderful, reflective weekend. And thank you, Tina. Thank you, Germaine. Keep the conversations going, and everybody have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
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 Thank you.